Sarah Whitmore was 32 years old. To the outside world, she was the picture of dedication, a woman who adored her 4 daughters, a wife who stood by her husband, and a friend who always seemed to have a warm smile. But behind closed doors, Sarah battled something unseen, a silent struggle that no one could fully understand. Then, on a quiet February 10th morning, a single phone call shattered the illusion of normalcy. It was Sarah. Her voice trembling, she told the dispatcher what she had done. She had shot her 4 daughters, and before anyone could intervene, it was too late. She had also turned the gun to herself. What drove a mother to such a devastating act? How did a loving home become the scene of an unspeakable tragedy? This is the story of Sarah Whitmore, and the warning signs that were missed. Before we unravel this intriguing story, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to True Crime Tales. Stay tuned for more gripping tales that expose the darkest depths of human nature and behavior. To those who knew her, Sarah Whitmore was the last person they would ever suspect of such a horrific act. She was a devoted wife, a loving mother, and a respected member of her small-town community. She and her husband, Mark Whitmore, had been married for nearly a decade. Friends described them as inseparable, partners who built a life together, bound by love and faith. Mark often spoke about his wife with admiration. "She was my best friend," he would say. "A wonderful mother, a kind soul. We had struggles like any family, but nothing that could have prepared us for this sting." Together, they raised 4 beautiful daughters. Emma, the eldest at 9, was thoughtful and wise beyond her years. She adored books, often getting lost in the pages of her favorite stories. Sophia, 7, was the free spirit. She loved to dance, always twirling through the house, filling the rooms with laughter. And then there were the twins, Ava and Lily, just 2 years old, full of energy, always giggling, always exploring. They were the joy of the family. Neighbors would often see Sarah pushing a stroller through the park, her daughters running ahead, their laughter echoing in the air. At church, she was known as the woman who never missed a Sunday, always quick to lend a helping hand, always there with a warm embrace for anyone in need. From the outside, the Whitmores were the perfect family, smiling in photos, celebrating birthdays, holding hands in the pews during Sunday service. But behind the picture-perfect facade, something was changing. Slowly, quietly, something was breaking. The changes started small. At first, it was just exhaustion, something every mother of young children understands. She would cancel coffee dates, miss a church event, and stay home when she once would have gone out. "I'm just tired," she would say, and everyone believed her. After all, raising 4 children, especially with twin toddlers, was no easy task. But soon, the fatigue turned into something else. She wasn't just tired, she was withdrawn. She stopped answering calls, stopped responding to messages. Friends would check in, and she would reassure them with a soft smile. "Everything's fine, just busy." But behind closed doors, Sarah was struggling. Postpartum depression, anxiety, PTSD, words that many people still don't fully understand. But for Sarah, they weren't just words. They were a shadow that followed her every day, growing darker, heavier, suffocating her bit by bit. She loved her children. There was never any doubt about that. But the weight of motherhood was crushing her. The long, sleepless nights, the constant crying, the never-ending demands. She began to feel like she was drowning, trapped in a life that she had once dreamed of but now could barely survive. There were moments, brief, terrifying moments, when she felt completely disconnected from reality. Like she was watching herself go through the motions, but wasn't really there. She would stare at her daughters, watching them play, and feel an overwhelming sense of guilt. "Why can't I feel happy?" she would wonder. "Why does this love feel so heavy?" Sarah knew something was wrong. She wasn't herself. So she did what she thought she was supposed to do. She sought help. She made appointments. She sat in waiting rooms. She filled out forms, circling words like sad, overwhelmed, and numb. And when she finally sat across from a doctor, she whispered what she had been too afraid to say out loud. "I don't feel okay." But the response? Medication. A prescription was scribbled on a notepad. A quick reassurance that this is normal for mothers and it will pass. No real conversation. No deep dive into her thoughts. No true understanding of the darkness that was consuming her. She left those appointments feeling unheard, misunderstood, and so she did what so many others in her position do. She kept it to herself. She told herself she just needed to be stronger, to push through, to smile more, to be a better wife, a better mother. But mental illness doesn't just disappear, and as the months went on, Sarah's silence grew louder. Mark Whitmore wasn't blind to the changes in his wife. He noticed the way she stared off into the distance, lost in thoughts she wouldn't share. He saw the way she barely touched her food at dinner, the way she cried when she thought no one was watching. He tried to reach her, tried to remind her that she wasn't alone. "Talk to me, Sarah," he would plead. "Tell me what's wrong." And sometimes she would. On rare nights, when the kids were asleep and the world was quiet, she would let the mask slip. She would tell him she felt like a failure. She was scared, that she didn't know who she was anymore. And Mark, desperate to help, would tell her what he thought she needed to hear. "You're an amazing mother. This is just a phase. It'll get better." He meant well. He loved her. But he didn't understand the depth of what she was going through. How could he? Depression isn't always visible. It doesn't come with a warning sign. And to the outside world, Sarah still looked fine. She still played with the kids. She still went to the grocery store. She still posted smiling pictures on social media. But behind that facade, she was breaking. Mark wasn't the only one who missed the warning signs. Sarah's family, her friends, they all wanted to believe she was okay. They wanted to believe that this was just stress, that it was just a phase, that she would bounce back like she always did. And Sarah? She didn't want to worry them. She didn't want to be a burden. So she kept pretending. But there were moments when she couldn't hide it. When she would sit in the car after running errands, gripping the steering wheel, too overwhelmed to go inside. Moments when she would break down in the shower, sobbing, covering her mouth so no one could hear. Moments when she would stare at her daughters, wondering if they would be better off without her. And then there were the darker thoughts, the ones she didn't dare say out loud, the ones that whispered, "End it, make it stop, they'll be okay without you." Despite everything, Sarah kept moving forward. She kept pretending. And as the weeks passed, her husband and family convinced themselves that she was getting better. She started smiling more, seemed more engaged, more present. Mark took it as a sign of hope. Maybe the worst was over. But what he didn't know was that sometimes the scariest part of depression is not when someone is at their lowest. It's when they seem at peace with their decision, when they've made up their mind. Sarah had made hers, and soon everything would come crashing down. February 10th, a day that started like any other but would end in unimaginable tragedy. The town of Willow Creek was quiet that morning. The sky was overcast, the streets empty, the kind of morning where nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Inside the Whitmore home, the air was still. Mark had left early for work, kissing Sarah on the forehead before he walked out the door, never suspecting it would be the last time he would see her alive. Neighbors who later recalled that morning would say there was nothing unusual. No shouts, no sounds of distress, just silence. Sarah, they assumed, was inside with her children, starting another busy day of motherhood. But inside those walls, something dark was unfolding. Sarah woke up before the sun. She hadn't slept much the night before, but that wasn't unusual. She had been struggling with insomnia for months, lying awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, lost in thoughts she never voiced out loud. But this morning was different. There was no hesitation, no doubt. It was as if she had already made up her mind. She moved through the house with an eerie calm, preparing breakfast, setting out clothes for the day. Things she had done 100 times before. But this time she wasn't preparing for a day ahead. She was preparing for an ending. Her daughters were still asleep, curled up in their beds, unaware of the dark thoughts swirling in their mother's mind. Sarah stood in the hallway, looking at their small faces, the innocence in their sleep. She whispered something, maybe a prayer, maybe an apology, and then, with slow, deliberate steps, she walked to the drawer where she kept the gun. At 7:42 a.m., the 911 dispatch center received a call. The voice on the other end was shaking but eerily composed. 911, what's your emergency? I did something bad. Ma'am, I need you to stay on the line. What happened? They're gone. My babies, I couldn't stop myself. Ma'am, where are you right now? Are you hurt? I don't want to be here anymore. The dispatcher's tone changed. The urgency was clear. They needed to get to her before it was too late. Stay with me, Sarah. Officers are on the way. Can you tell me where you are? But before she could answer, the line went dead. The first officers arrived at the Whitmore residence within minutes. The house stood eerily still, the front door locked. Officers knocked, no response. They called Sarah's phone, no answer. The tension was thick as they forced their way inside, guns drawn, expecting the worst. But nothing could have prepared them for what they found. The house was unnervingly quiet. The smell of breakfast still lingered in the air, plates set on the table, untouched, toys scattered on the floor as if life had been interrupted in an instant. Then the officers saw it. The bedroom doors, slightly ajar, a sickening feeling crept over them as they stepped inside. The details of what they found are too painful to fully describe, but what we do know is that Sarah's 4 daughters, Emma, Sophia, Ava, and Lily, were gone. Their small bodies lay still, their lives taken by the one person who was supposed to protect them most. And in the master bedroom, Sarah Whitmore. Her body slumped over. The gun is still in her hand. For a moment, there was nothing but silence, no cries, no movement, just the heavy, suffocating reality of what had just occurred. The officers who found them were hardened professionals, but even they struggled to comprehend the horror before them. Some turned away. Others stood frozen. It was the kind of scene that would haunt them forever. Outside, more police cars arrived. News spread quickly through the small town. Neighbors gathered on the street, whispering, crying, unable to believe what they were hearing. Mark Whitmore was at work when he got the call. A call that shattered his world in an instant. A call that no husband, no father should ever receive. Why? That was the question that echoed through every conversation, every news report, every tear-filled interview in the days that followed. How could a mother, a woman so full of love, commit such an unthinkable act? Some blamed mental illness, others blamed isolation. Some whispered that Sarah must have been hiding something deeper, something no one ever saw. But in the end, the only person who could truly answer that question was gone. The news spread like wildfire. The media arrived quickly. Reporters lined the streets of Willow Creek, cameras flashing, news vans parked outside the Whitmore home. Headlines called it a family massacre. Some labeled Sarah Whitmore a monster. Others speculated wildly, searching for a motive. What went wrong? The newspapers asked. Was this premeditated? Were there signs? But for those who truly knew Sarah, the answer was far more painful. This wasn't the story of a villain. It was the story of a woman who lost her battle with something invisible, something no one saw coming until it was too late. Mark Whitmore had to identify the bodies of his wife and children. The man who had once built a life with Sarah, who had kissed his daughters goodnight just days before, now stood alone in the cold, sterile air of the morgue. He had lost everything in the span of a single morning. For days, he didn't speak publicly. The weight of his grief was too heavy. But when he finally did, his words stunned the world. Mark's voice breaking with emotion. She wasn't a monster. She was sick. His voice trembled as he spoke to reporters. He wasn't there to defend what Sarah had done. Nothing could excuse the horror of that morning. But he wanted the world to understand that she had been fighting demons no one could see. Mark, in a tearful interview, Sarah loved our girls more than anything. She adored them. This wasn't her. This was the sickness, and I wish, God, I wish I had seen it sooner. His words sent shockwaves through the nation. This wasn't just another crime story. This was something bigger. This was a warning. It's easy to look at stories like Sarah Whitmore's and search for someone to blame, to ask, why would a mother do this? To shake our heads in horror and move on. But what if we didn't? What if we asked a different question? What if we asked, how many mothers are silently suffering right now? How many families are on the brink of tragedy, unaware of the storm brewing beneath the surface? Sarah Whitmore made a choice that can never be justified. But her story is not just about one terrible morning. It's about what led up to it. It's about the moments that were missed, the cries for help went unheard, the battle with mental illness that went unseen, until it was too late. If there is one thing to take away from this, let it be this: check in on the ones you love. Not just when they seem sad, but even when they seem fine. Especially when they seem fine. Because sometimes the ones who seem the strongest are the ones who are barely holding on. The story of Sarah Whitmore and her daughters is heartbreaking. It's difficult to comprehend, impossible to justify, and painful to even speak about. But ignoring it won't change the reality. This isn't just about one mother, one family, or one town. This is about something bigger, a silent crisis happening in homes all over the world. Mental health struggles, especially among mothers, often go unseen. Too many women suffer in silence, too afraid to admit that they're drowning, too ashamed to ask for help, and too often their suffering is dismissed. You're just tired. Motherhood is hard for everyone. You'll feel better soon. But what if they don't? What if the weight becomes unbearable? One of the most important lessons we can take from this tragedy is the need to recognize the warning signs of mental illness early. Depression and anxiety don't always look the way we expect them to. They can be hidden behind smiles, behind routine, behind the simple words, "I'm fine." If someone in your life seems different, more withdrawn, more exhausted, more distant, don't ignore it. Check in, ask how they're really feeling, and if they open up, listen. Sometimes simply knowing that someone cares can be enough to make a difference. Motherhood is beautiful, but it can also be overwhelming. And yet the mental health struggles that many mothers face are often dismissed or overlooked. Postpartum depression, anxiety, and even postpartum psychosis are real, but access to proper care is still limited for many women. We need better mental health screenings after childbirth. We need doctors to take their patients seriously when they say they don't feel okay. We need support systems, therapy, resources, and community networks that actually reach the people who need them. No mother should feel alone in her struggles. No mother should have to suffer in silence. If you are struggling, please reach out. You do not have to go through this alone. There is no shame in asking for help. There is no weakness in admitting you are struggling. And if you know someone who might be suffering, don't wait for them to speak up. Reach out to them first. A conversation, a check-in, a simple "I'm here for you," it could save a life. This story is not just about tragedy. It is about understanding. It is about awareness. It is about learning from the pain so that we can prevent it from happening again. If you or someone you love is struggling, please seek help. Let's break the stigma surrounding mental health. Let's create a world where no one has to suffer alone, where reaching out for help is seen as strength, not weakness. Because no life should be lost to a battle that could have been fought with the right support. Sarah Whitmore's story is a devastating one. But maybe, just maybe, her story can be the reason someone else gets the help they need before it's too late. If you found this video meaningful, share it. You never know who might need to hear this message today. Let's spread awareness. Let's have these conversations, and most importantly, let's take care of each other. Thank you for watching.